Welcome to the Scale the Chaos podcast, where we talk all things contributing to your organization's chaos and dysfunction. I'm Rhonda Lea, founder and owner of Scale the Chaos. My guest today is a writer and producer for TV. He was the head writer for 9 Comedy Central roasts and was the executive producer of Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party, starring Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg. His work in late night includes nightly shows hosted by George Lopez and Arsenio Hall. He is a humor and storytelling expert who works with corporate presenters. Please welcome my friend, Chris McGuire.
All right. Who wrote that intro? That intro is...
I don't know.
I know I wrote it, but it was
man.
way too long. It sounded too long in retrospect.
Okay. Welcome my friend, Chris McGuire.
No, all good. It's all good.
Chris, tell us briefly about your journey into becoming an expert in humor.
Sure. I started the first time I walked on a comedy stage was in 1990, Providence, Rhode Island. I went on stage and everyone always goes, "Oh, the first time was terrible," and all this. First time was great. And then I was awful for 6 months and I couldn't figure out how. And eventually I did, and I was determined to figure it out. And so I did stand up in Boston for about 8 years before moving to LA, where I started working in the Comedy Central writers' rooms. So I'd be surrounded by a lot of funny people. I learned a ton. Most of the hosts were usually comedians. They were almost always people who were presenting as themselves. So that's why this is working with presenters or salespeople is easy for me, because I already know how to write for other people and write for other voices. But along the way, I worked at these Comedy Central writers' rooms. I did 9 roasts. I did a running late night with George Lopez on the first talk show on TBS, which was Lopez Tonight, and then Arsenio Hall's Reboot. And then I worked with Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, which was, you had to have a sense of humor to do. So
Right?
No, they were fantastic. It was a very stressful environment. They were super fun to work with.
And we've talked briefly before about how hard it is to be funny under pressure. Right?
Yeah. And you really nobody's funny at 9 o'clock in the morning when you're staring across the table from 2 people who have no idea what the day holds for them, and they're half in makeup and half in wardrobe.
Yeah.
And you have to shoot for, I got a half an hour to present what we're doing today. And Martha used to time me. She goes, "You have 23 minutes. And then I'd be like, "Oh my God." So I usually would try to appeal to Snoop, because I knew he's a pretty easy laugh. But my goal would be just to keep it loose and try to make them laugh a couple of times. And I knew if I could make them laugh a few times, that we'd be okay. So it was really more about like creating
a good vibe. Yeah. So let's bring that to the professional setting.
Yes.
And how important humor is, because you've transitioned into coaching business professionals to bring humor and levity into the professional setting. And I love this topic because on more than one occasion, I have had people say to me in passing things like, "I don't really care what I do or where I work, as long as I can come to work and have fun, or as long as I'm having fun, or as long as I'm around people that are having fun or that are fun," that type of thing. So let's talk about that and why humor is so important in the professional setting and what it does for efficiency and productivity.
You would know better than me, but in terms of the big number, which is about employee engagement, which is frightening, how much businesses across the world lose every year due to people calling in sick, people not being productive, at the whole workplace accidents, stuff like that. People weren't being present or drunk at work or whatever, however that happens. But it's an astounding number. It's around like 500 billion, I think, every year. This is the Gallup study from 4 years ago. So the thing that really hit me about that, because what I do, a lot of people will go, "This is a soft skill." So I'm always trying to put some kind of data or number on it. When I read that study, what really jumped out at me is that the biggest complaint from disengaged workers was a lack of communication. And a lack of vision and all that stuff. And the best way to, I think, to communicate what a company is all about or what a project's all about or how a team can work together is through some storytelling, some humor, and some levity. People remember things when they're presented humorously
Yes.
more than they do just straight data.
Uh-huh.
When all that's introduced, people report higher levels of satisfaction with the organization, and leaders who use humor are perceived as being more competent and they have happier teams.
Yeah, and I like because you referenced absenteeism and attendance. And I know as a manager, there were always those certain people who would frequently call in sick, and you knew they weren't actually sick. Or if they legitimately weren't feeling well, a lot of it did come down to mental health, right?
Sure.
And I think all of us can remember a time where we maybe didn't feel super well, but just the idea of going somewhere they knew would be fun to participate in, be around fun people, that alone makes us feel better physically and more excited to go do that activity, right? So if you're talking about work and you're talking about a professional environment that's fun, people are going to be less likely to want to be absent, right? Want to take a day off, need to take a mental health day off. And I'm not saying that if people are legitimately sick or
I know what you mean. People calling sick. It's a thing, and it's stress.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's stress. People who work in humorous environments or environments that at least do some levity, it's 70% of them report lower levels of stress. And that's huge because we know the medical effects of stress, and you're not at your best. You're not being productive if you're stressed out because your organization is stressed.
Yeah. And I know you had some statistics. Let's talk really briefly about some statistics because as an operations person, I love numbers.
Yeah, for sure.
I love to quantify things, right?
You bet.
So let's talk about some of these most profound statistics.
The biggest one is that 82% of employees who rated their leaders as having a good sense of humor reported higher levels of efficiency. So that's 82%. That's Gallup.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, 91% of executives believe a sense of humor is important for career advancement. That's a big number. That's Robert Half. And this all goes with one of my favorite stories is about Warren Buffett, who was terrified of public speaking when he was younger. And he used to get physically ill when the thought of having to speak in front of people, it was debilitating. And he went down he heard about Dale Carnegie, and he's notoriously cheap. So he knew if he went down the office and wrote a check, he would show up. Okay. So he goes down the office and down in Manhattan, he writes a check to show up for one of the workshops. He gets out on the street afterwards, goes into an alley, throws up because he's so nervous, calls the bank, cancels the check. So he had a whole journey of trying to get through, and eventually he took the class and it was transformative for him. And when you see photos of him at his desk, he's got his Dale Carnegie certificate framed, Dale Carnegie, over his desk. He credits learning how to speak, to be relaxed at speaking and all that stuff for his success. And when he's funny, like the guy is funny. He's like very quotable. And when people love listening to him talk because it's wisdom, but it's not only that, he communicates with humor.
Yeah. And it's memorable.
Yes.
Because it's enjoyable.
Yep.
Okay.
So that other number about stress levels, 67%. Increased creativity with teams that use humor, 20%, 36% higher levels of cohesion and trust. And I think this is a big one, Ron, because if you're not leading with humor and levity, your team, the people who work for you are going to use it probably against you.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen that. I have seen that happen for sure. Because it makes you relatable as a person, right? And people who are able to relate to you are going to follow you willingly, right? And those who are not approachable, it's going to be really hard for them.
I think for a leader, self-deprecation is important, like a little bit, not the right amount. But if you have an idea and it doesn't work, you got to
Yeah.
call it out to your group. You can't pretend that bad idea that you made them do didn't happen. You have to be like, that was a dumb idea. How do we do
How do we
better next
fix it?
time? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The leader doesn't have to be the smartest person in the
No, it
room.
has to be the
And
person
they can
everybody
make
wants to follow.
yeah, and they can make the mistakes, and the best leaders are not the smartest ones in the room. So admitting that, being open to admitting that creates transparency and loyalty.
100%. It's a mix. You don't want to work with somebody who's just a total clown
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they'll end up, a lot of times, that personality type might not be particularly good at getting things done. And that
Uh-huh.
usually falls on your type A, second, third in command.
Yeah.
And that eventually that goodwill is spent. But if you're a good manager and if you're effective and you use some humor, it's 100% loyalty.
Yeah. And I like how you mentioned you obviously don't want to work for a manager who's a clown because there's different levels and different types of humor. So let's talk a little bit about
Sure.
the different types, what's appropriate, what's not
Sure.
appropriate. Because I know that you have this hot sauce scale.
Yeah, I
that
got a
you
little
use.
theory on all of
Yeah,
this. I
which I
feel like
love.
all of this is like people will often ask, what's the difference between humor and comedy?
Uh-huh.
And that's a big question. And because my background's almost entirely comedy.
Uh-huh.
And so I usually say it's like levels of hot sauce. So you start at the lowest level, which is like
Mm-hmm.
levity is a nice, it's just a little flavor on things. It's pleasant. It makes the sandwich taste better.
Mm-hmm.
Humor is more complex. It's a little spicier. The goal of humor is to elicit some kind of laughter, some kind of reaction, whereas levity is more like, hey, let's all chill, it's all good,
Yeah.
let's get things done. And it's a little bit of just creating a relaxed environment. The next level up from humor is comedy, and comedy is more practiced. Humor is practiced. Comedy is
Mm-hmm.
even more practiced. Comedy is generally scripted, and comedy can land you in HR if you're not careful. You have to be
Yeah.
really careful about how you use it because often what I always say is every joke has a target. So if
Uh-huh.
you're writing a joke, if the target's not you, then you're taking a risk. So the
Mm-hmm.
target could be your competitors, the target
Uh-huh.
could be a system or something. But if
Yeah.
the target's somebody else, it could get you in trouble. And then the highest level is obviously I always talk about roasts.
Uh-huh.
So insult comedy is like the ghost pepper of humor, and that is you should just stay away
Absolutely
from
not.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if somebody's, hey, let's do an event where we roast the boss, do not do that. That is a terrible idea.
Right.
That
Even
is
if
a
they agree.
awful idea. Yeah, exactly. Or hire somebody else to come in and do it.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea. So it starts with just a little bit of flavor, a little bit of fun. What comedy writers a lot of times will say about comedy writers are notoriously snotty about comedy. So they'll look at something and say, oh, that guy's not funny. He's just fun. Fun is good in business.
Uh-huh.
Like fun is good. And fun isn't necessarily like a hard joke. Fun is a humorous observation
Yeah.
or those light icebreakers in meetings. If you're having a meeting at 4:30 and everybody's been working all day, or first thing in the morning, have a nice little icebreaker, something, and have it be sincere and not something you just want to check off your list.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a stand-up comedy.
No. A little bit of this goes so far. A little bit of this goes so darn far because, again, levity creates and humor create likability and trust between employees and leaders and within organizations or with customers.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of levity, there's a little bit of humor. You loosen up and stuff like that. The customer doesn't feel they're being hard sell
Or dismissed or
or
anything like
dismissed.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to talk in a minute about how we do that. But really quickly, I want to talk about pranks and where
Oh,
do
yeah.
office pranks fall within there? Because
Yeah.
I have been witness to some interesting pranks in the workplace.
Yep.
Some that I've thought that was completely inappropriate.
Yeah. Sometimes they can work, but man,
And it depends on the person too.
The subject of the prank has to have a really good sense of humor.
Yes.
It can't be and has to have a not a high sensitivity.
Yes.
And so I'm not a fan of them. I've
Yeah.
seen them go horribly awry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Horribly, because I was working at a show, and this was a hard comedy show. This was like hard comedy roast. We were roasting the week, all the writers were super funny. And one of the writers had a goofy ringtone. So another writer was like, I'm going to take his phone, and he taped it under the table, and then he would call it, and then it would go off, and then this guy be looking for his phone, and he couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you revealed the prank, he was so mad.
Yeah.
He was so mad. And it wasn't just 5 minutes mad, take a walk around the lot. It was like real mad for a long time. And I don't know that he ever forgave that person.
Yeah.
Because he had a history of being what he perceived as bullied. And I'm not don't even want to put that in quotes.
Yeah.
He perceived that he had been bullied, and he felt this bullying, and it damaged the relationship. So that's not good.
And that's good to point out, because most organizations have these no tolerance for bullying policies, right? And a lot of times, these pranks do fall into the category of bullying, because it's most of the time they are meant to humiliate the target, whoever the target is, right? Because whoever hid the phone underneath it was to laugh while he frantically looked for his phone. Do you know what I'm saying?
Humiliate's a tough word, but he felt that way for sure. And I was the manager at the time. I was the manager, and I'm like, guys, don't do this.
Yeah.
And it's hard but the problem is when you're working with a bunch of creative people, and again, this was 10 years ago, it's hard to be like, now you're making me the bad guy by saying, don't do this. So we did it because I didn't think it was going to be so bad. And then it was bad. And I'm like, guys, let's be done. But the funniest part was when the host, who's my boss, came in, and the room had all this hostility in it. And we're supposed to be writing a funny script. And the guy who was pranked on just kept calling back to how much of a bad guy, for lack of not that word, but like the other guy was who pranked him. And my boss was just like utterly confused, because I was just trying to get past it.
Yeah.
That was funny to me.
Yeah.
Was the utter confusion from my boss, which was relatively harmless. And then eventually we told him, what's going on? And then I told him, and I'm like, yeah, it was really bad. I think I sent that guy home for the day, not like punitively. I go, I think maybe
for your sake,
and you're going to get an apology and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
And there are definitely people, and you should be able to recognize those who don't like to be pranked. But then there's also situations where there's two people in particular, and they have a lot of fun pranking each other. They're both good sports about it. And the whole rest of the office a lot of times gets involved in it, and it becomes this thing, and it can be a fun thing that's added to the company culture. But I have also seen the other hand of that, where people will particularly target specific people they know will not enjoy the prank. And that's why they prank them, right? So you also have to be careful.
Yes, there's two issues with pranks. One is, look, the thing you just described about the two people that like they've got an ongoing feud and they prank each other, but in a fun way.
Yeah.
That's a social contract.
Yeah.
This is what I say about roasting, is like the social contract is, I'm going to prank you, and you're going to laugh about the prank, or go, you got me. And then you're going to prank me, and I'm going to laugh and say, you got me. And but at the end of the day, we're friends, and we're going to shake hands.
Yeah.
That's a social contract.
Yeah.
If you don't have a social contract, you're risking hurting somebody's feelings or getting somebody upset. And if there's a power structure, like somebody's a VP and they do this to like a manager level person, that is really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you do it to your manager, I've seen some people prank their manager, but only because but only because this was like somebody who they knew could take it, right? Yeah. But you have to be so careful, and you have to.
I would recommend against it, but again, it's if it organically. I would never put it on my to-do list. Hey, you gotta prank each other. I would literally say, if it comes out organically, be careful, but understand the social contract. And that's what I learned in roasting, is that I get up, I'm going to insult you, and then you're going to get up and you're going to insult me. And the intent is to make each other laugh, and we're going to hug and shake hands at the end of it.
Yes. So in a way, a prank is a office appropriate, or sorry, the social contract prank, right? Is an
Yeah.
office appropriate roast.
Yeah, it's usually something more elaborate than, but it's generally
Just
more
jokes. Yeah.
nuanced than like an insult.
So let's talk a little bit more about, because you started to go into, let's do some icebreakers, those
Yeah,
types of things.
sure.
So what types of things, if somebody is like they're a manager, or maybe they're not even necessarily a manager,
Mhm.
but they feel like their work environment could use some levity, right?
Sure.
What are some techniques that people could start doing to help contribute or promote this levity in their culture?
Sure. Sure. Some of it is just like creating levity creates trust, and
Mhm.
levity creates like a cohesive environment.
Yes.
So I think if like Monday, people do, hey, what happened over the weekend? And they're ice breaking the meeting and stuff like that. That's good. But you could even be more specific about it. It's a prompt. It's like an AI. The more specific you are with your
Uh-huh.
prompt, the better you're going to get.
Yes.
So it could, what's the most memorable thing that happened over the weekend? What was the craziest thing that happened over the
Mhm.
weekend? You may get people just telling you it was a boring weekend and that's how crazy it was. And
Yeah.
people were laughing about that it wasn't a crazy weekend. But I do think the more specific you are about how you prompt an icebreaker, the better you are at getting things out of people.
Uh-huh.
I think family and pets are light and safe.
Mm-hmm.
Most people have some kind of spousal thing or something with their kids or something with their pets. It could be something, one of the biggest things in terms of where I've seen effective response when I do workshops is photos. If something happened that sort of makes you feel something like, oh, that tickled me,
Mm-hmm.
or that really frustrated me, or I just thought this was weird, take
Yeah.
a photo of it and
Uh-huh.
then share it with the group. And I found that if you approach it like a puzzle,
Uh-huh.
it unlocks some creativity and humor. So it's, hey, I saw this, I felt this, and I've got a question.
Uh-huh.
And that's how an observational joke happens. So it could be something like when I was in Vegas, both myself and the guy running the workshop
Mm-hmm.
were in the men's room when somebody got arrested.
Oh,
And it's the middle of the day at a
only in Vegas.
casino. Now, I didn't take a photo because I'm not nuts, but my friend did. And I didn't even know he was there, but it was when we went to share photos, we're like, oh, okay.
And he
What do you
shared it.
have to
Yeah.
do to get arrested in a men's room in Las Vegas? And then all the jokes came up about like
Oh,
water
yeah.
conservation, how many, boy, they're really serious about if you flush twice. Whatever the thing is, there was levity and we're all laughing and you're watching people solve a puzzle
Yeah.
in a creative way. And we get that was like that's one of the most effective things. So that's super easy.
That's
Gift,
super easy.
gifts are great, by the way, in business communication, or if you're celebrating a win,
Mm-hmm.
throw a gift in.
Yeah.
If you're selling, if you're like, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Let's see that baby that walks in the room and then walks out. All these things are, they're humorous. You get them on the email. If you get them from
Yeah.
your boss, again, as long as he's not being a clown or she's
Yeah.
not being a clown, it just lightens everything up. And I think memes are good. I think
Yes.
things like Monday memes or something like that. You could do a quick, what's the, I'm trying to think, like a call to action to everybody. Hey, this week we're doing distracted boyfriend. Come in with your version of that.
Yeah.
And that's a super easy one. You teach people how to do it. It takes 2 minutes, and then
Yep.
people come in and they share. The main thing that I've found is whatever happens when somebody's trying to be funny, as long
Yes.
as it isn't something that doesn't have to be addressed because they
Yeah.
offended somebody, but
Yeah.
they're trying to be humorous or trying levity, is to be supportive.
Yes.
So yeah, congratulations. Everybody gets it's participation trophy time. As far as I'm concerned, if you're trying, you're winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's like some easy stuff. And out of office replies are an
Yes.
opportunity to have a gag, and your LinkedIn bios are an opportunity for levity. But in general, I like structure. So
Mm-hmm.
I would gradually Maybe start with icebreakers, then
Yeah.
maybe do like a Monday meme thing. Maybe it's a sliding into the weekend like thing in the middle. Maybe it's humor channel in Slack, something.
Which I've had.
Um,
Yeah. I've worked
yeah,
with
which a lot
organizations
of
who've had
companies do.
yeah, in teams. And this is whether you're working remote or not, right? You can have
Oh,
like these
100%.
humor things. And I
If you're
also,
working remote,
yeah,
this is even more.
even more important. I've even seen with this icebreaker, you come in and you tell a quick, funny something that happened to you over the weekend. And then that also encourages oh yeah, and then everybody's sharing the funny things that happened over the weekend and everybody's having a good laugh,
Sure.
and then you go into whatever the meeting is when everybody is hopefully in a good mood.
Well, that one of the most interesting. There's a great book called Humor Seriously, written by. I'll give you the thing so you can put it
Okay.
in, but it's like Stanford Business School,
Okay.
and they had some study that I saw that blew my mind, which is they did two groups. One saw a short humorous video,
Uh-huh.
and the other one had to watch something that wasn't humorous at all, like a training thing or something for 3 minutes or something like that. And then they went into a creative task, and the people that saw the humorous one were automatically better. They were way ahead of the other control group. A lot of it could just be like, hey, saw a funny video, throw it up there. Again, you have to be careful with sensitivities, but
Yes.
like for the most part, a little bit of that. Look, everybody likes, you're not going to offend anybody with a video with a puppy or
Yeah.
a goat and a cat making friends. You know what I
And
mean?
there's
It's,
plenty of those out there.
oh my God, I get them every day because
Yeah.
I'm a cat freak. But like, I love that stuff. So there's lots of, again, it's just levity. It's just making you smile. There's plenty of ways to do this.
Yeah. So thank you, Chris. And listeners, for more information on how you can scale the chaos in your organization, head on over to my website, scalethechaos.com. And you can also find my other podcasts at scalethechaos.com/podcasts. I'm Rhonda Lea, and we'll chat more next time. Thank you.